All right, welcome everyone. Hi, and special thank you to the human team for hosting us today in this beautiful, what really feels like an oasis. And the shade coverage here, absolutely phenomenal. So thank you for that. So we also want to thank Human for bringing together this fabulous panel of thought leaders who are here to provoke and ask questions and give their thoughts about a very prevalent topic. Because up and down the Quaset, you will hear AI not just make its way into the conversation, but it is the focal point of their conversation. And now that AI is completely transforming the industry, we all need to rethink, what does this mean for visibility? What does this mean for trust? What does this mean for control? Which is a lot. But we've got you covered because we have this excellent panelists who are going to share what they've been seeing, share their perspective, and share their insights. So please help me in welcoming. We've got Luke, who is the Chief Operating Officer and President for Mileage Plus at United. We have Octavio, who is the EVP, Head of Content and Creative for Dentsu Creative. We have Natalie, who is the Head of Agencies for North America at Microsoft. We have Henry, the Senior Director of PayPal Ads UK, and of course, Stu, the CEO of Human. Now you can applaud. Let's hear it for them, guys. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, I always find it nice to, you get to see their beautiful smiling faces. Let's get to know them on a more personal basis. We'd love to hear from you all just to kick us off. Oh, and I should introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Piermont. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at 3C Ventures. Prior to that, I was at Google for 19 years. So excited for a new stage, just like we are embracing this new digital advertising world. So that's me. Let's get to know you all. What's one way that you've used AI recently in a fun or interesting way? It does not need to be work related of how you organized a spreadsheet. And then also, what unique perspective do you guys bring to this conversation today? Everyone's looking at Stu.
All right. I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and start. So quite literally, this is a true story. Sitting with my wife a few weekends ago, we decided to do two things. One, plan a trip, this trip, where I said, let me just figure out the itinerary. Let me go ahead and go through the itinerary over the course of a couple of days, use the agent to then find specific places we were going to go and actually get us reservations at the places we want to go.
I was going to ask, did it tell you reservations that were not already fully booked and purchased by a brand on this beach?
Even more specifically, figuring out which Michelin-starred restaurants we want to go to for which cuisines along the way. Now, that was part of it. What I was actually doing was turning myself into an action figure. But, which I failed miserably at because I'm not the creative one on the panel.
Yeah. And what unique perspective do you bring here today, Stu?
I'm looking at this through the lens of a business leader trying to apply it to technology problems, but also trying to figure out how to solve technology problems for clients in a way that you apply the technology itself. So it's not just figuring out a spreadsheet, making the company more efficient, although I have to do that also, but also trying to figure out what the implications are to everybody else that's here to make their businesses run more smoothly. So how do I productize that?
You're next.
Yeah, no, I had time to think about it, so thank you.
It worked.
So we're going on a vacation, a holiday in a few weeks' time, and we have to have somebody to look after our dogs. And there's this great website in the UK called Trusted House Sitters, where somebody turns up, they live in your house for a week, they look after your dogs, they care for them. But we had an application, and it just seemed too perfect. And it was from a genuine person, lots of reviews, all the rest of it. But I suspected he'd written it with AI, and that made me not trust him to look after my dogs. So I did have to ask ChatGPT if that application was made with AI, and it came back with a yes. So I kind of went off him. I was like, look, if you can't be bothered to write a human declaration or application, then I'm not sure you want me looking after my baby dogs.
Maybe he's a busy guy, Henry.
Well, again, too busy to look after my baby dogs, I'm not having it. He needs to dedicate 24 hours.
But it does bring up a conversation around trust that is very prevalent today. What unique perspective do you bring for us here today?
Oh, well, the PayPal sort of direction of travel is agentic commerce. Yeah. That's what we're interested in leveraging with PayPal Ads, which is my part of the PayPal business. So look, I mean, I think we've got to bring some of that agentic capability into our ad solutions, our ad units. We've got to, personalize. We've got to help consumers find and buy more of what they love, which is, what we're trying to do. So, but it's balancing that, because as I say, you go too far with that, and sometimes you turn consumers off.
Thank you. Natalie?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So professionally, I use Copilot daily. One of my favorite features is just the simple coaching by Copilot in Outlook. So before you send an email, run it through coaching. It will tell you really useful tricks around tone, clarity that you may not pick up yourself. But on a personal level, I am a mom to an 8 and a 6-year-old. And my 8-year-old, while of course I think he's brilliant, is really struggling with basic English grammar. And I don't know how many of your parents, but it's not the most exciting thing for a very active 8-year-old boy to sit down and learn punctuation. So I actually do a lot of generative AI worksheets for him. And I say, put it in the voice of his favorite book series, which is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, so that it's got humor and tone, and it really speaks to an 8-year-old. And at the same time is teaching him punctuation, grammar, spelling, etc.
And unique perspective?
So I have a really deep background in consumer insights. Before I came to the agency side, I ran the consumer insights, thought leadership at Microsoft. So I always go back to what do the consumers want? What problem are you trying to solve? And I also really genuinely believe that technology can and does make the world a better place. But I love the saying, the future is already here. It's just not equally distributed. So I really like sitting on panels like this that get at the heart of some of these kind of more thorny, more ambiguous issues, because that's the way I believe this technology will only reach its true potential.
Thank you. Octavio?
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Thanks for coming here. All right. The last thing I'm using on the personal side. So we're redoing our deck in the backyard, and so we did all the drawings, and I said, okay, now let's use AI. So I went to Firefly, and okay, this is the deck. Let's make this 2D shape into a proper deck and start playing with that. And then I have my client, aka my wife, was like, no, I don't like this, I don't like that, let's change here, let's change that. So basically I was using AI for that, and it was great. It was really fast and perfect. I don't waste time rendering anything in 3D, and it was amazing.
You know the saying, happy client, happy life.
All right, that's it.
I know it well.
on the personal and the professional side, it works perfectly.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And your unique perspective?
I think we are in the moment that AI serves for everything,
Yeah.
right? And okay, everything can be done with AI, but how you can do that authentically, right, and creatively to deliver the right output, that's what's going to be the perspective. That's why I try to say to all my clients and bring that relevancy when you use this. Let's use in a way that is going to enable you to do better, not just to do it for the sake of doing. Because I think there's this pressure on the market. Do AI, use AI for this, use AI for that. All right, let's use with an intent in the right way to enable something right.
I love that intent. All right, Luke, up for you.
I'm a father of 4 kids. I travel a lot, and my wife is busy. She has a great business that she runs herself. And I recently have started using ChatGPT as my sort of primary go-to, bit of a Claude user, but mostly ChatGPT, paid subscriber, paid for actually all my kids, except my 8-year-olds have their own paid subs on it, just to encourage them to use this tool for anything they can think of. But just last week, I had 20 minutes to make dinner for everyone. And I was like, hey, ChatGPT, adopting the persona of a high quality chef who can turn out amazing food quickly. I've got chicken thighs, a tin of tomatoes, some olives. I've got every dry spice you can imagine. I've got some preserved lemons. I like Mediterranean style dishes. Give me something I can get prepared and have ready in 20 minutes. And it gave me the recipe, gave me the steps. I prepared it. My kids were like, Dad, this is really cool. How did you make this dish? I'm like, I just whipped it up myself. And so I think that's been just as a fun kind of personal use case.
Did it took 20 minutes for you? Or it took longer?
It actually took less.
He's
than
a
20
very
minutes.
good cooker.
That's why I was
Yeah. I mean, I cook a lot already, but like it was easy. I've got all the travel use cases, like some of these examples. I think Stu, yours, very familiar with those. In terms of what I bring, so at United, we're now the world's largest airline. Last year we flew 174 million passengers at various places around the world. At Connected Media, which I also have responsibility for as COO, we've taken essentially all the digital services across our travel ecosystem, extended out into third parties to create opportunities for brands to connect with travelers as they move through flights, through trips, or more broadly through life. And we are using AI extensively across the entire enterprise. So under the United hat, there's how do we transform and deliver better sort of personalization of the experience. Under the connective hat, it's how do we deliver content that's personalized and curated for the individual, whether it's content on a screen, whether it's what we've done with Hemispheres, our magazine, which we've made digital, and taking that to all 330 destinations. And so there's this role of Gen AI for content creation. There's agentic to help understand the memory-based view of customers that we've built over decades in some cases to create hyper-personalization. There's a lot of use of sort of predictive modeling and machine learning, ingesting into those models, large language models and the agentic tools that we use to make sure that we're getting precise in our operations and we're finding ways to generate sort of the maximum return from everything that we're doing, whether it's a service experience with a customer in our contact center or an ad that we're serving to a customer on our seatback screen. It's how do we optimize for lifetime value at every single one of those placements. And then ultimately, and I think to actually, Henry, to your point, it's how do we do all of that in a way that is human and that feels real and authentic for our customers. And so we have this responsible AI framework, which puts people in control throughout the process. So we haven't just handed everything over to the machine and said, go, but we've kept people very much involved and we've learned along the way, like we've had our own hallucinations and we've had our own challenges that we've used to say, all right, people have to be part of this process in a way that makes sure that what we're producing and what we're delivering to our customers is amazing and helps build brand loyalty over time.
Yeah, that's so important. I think so many people assume that or have this perception that AI will just take over everything and there will be nothing left for humans to do. But in reality, there's still so much that needs to go into it. You mentioned the word agentic AI, which is certainly an industry buzzword here these days and will certainly be discussed today. But because it is a buzzword, I always find it's helpful to first kind of define these things, set the context, make sure that we're all speaking the same language. So do one of you guys want to take a stab at sharing what is agentic AI? Why are we talking about it?
Should we just ask?
I was waiting for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stu.
I'll start and everybody else can drive into this. But from my perspective, agentic AI is the next iteration of AI. I think, first of all, when we talk about AI, the first thing that people come to mind is this notion of generative AI. It is not generative AI. No. It relies upon generative AI as one of the inputs into it. Ultimately, agentic is some kind of automated activity that occurs with a level of authority and autonomy to act on your behalf. Now, to act on your behalf, you have to have a level of trust. To act on your behalf, you have to have a certain level of authentication and permission, and you have to have access to lots and lots of information that's been indexed in a way that can be recalled to be able to create the outcome or transactional behavior that you want. That's agentics.
I mean, I just add it, like another component, which is the learning component as well. As it works, it learns and it makes changes, and I think that for a lot of humans is the scary bit. This sort of independent learning.
Mm-hmm. We will get into that.
And I don't know. I think that's where we got to start to, have some transparency.
One helpful categorization that we use for agents is your personal agents. So that's what a few folks have mentioned, your ChatGPTs, your Gemini, your Copilots. Then we think also about enterprise agents. Yeah. So the agents that would live for us in our Microsoft 365 suite of products, help you make a better Excel formula, et cetera. But I think what we'll get into today, and I think what's really interesting to a lot of people here on the Quasette, are brand agents. Yeah. So that is a business agent that is operating somewhat autonomously, right? And it is the least defined of the agent categories right now, but that also makes it very exciting.
Yeah.
And there are as many possibilities of what brand agents will look like as there are businesses out there.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where the kind of excitement is sort of focusing, this week and going forward.
Yeah, and I think some of that misunderstanding or just don't know or who's actually operating is breeding a lot of these questions about visibility and about trust. So it begs the question of like, with agentic systems and autonomy, how do you verify that these agents are actually acting on behalf of like real human intent and not on like behalf of some bad actor? Because let's face it, time and time again, we've seen new technology comes out to market, bad actors follow. It's, the common curse that we know well. So how do you verify that today or identify it even?
I'm sure there are much more sort of technical answers, but from our perspective, I think you test small. I mean, we don't deploy it on everything from day one, right? You put it out there, you have some specific use cases you test it on, and you see where the challenges may occur. So I think that's the first thing. I mean, this idea of global domination just doesn't exist because we're going to take a sort of a relatively stepped approach to roll out. But the other, it probably is going to come up later, but regulation, legislation, those things, and if we're all honest, they are running behind the technology. They're not in place yet. And someone said to me the other day, we could make a brand new Marilyn Monroe movie tomorrow, right? And look like Marilyn Monroe, is Marilyn Monroe, could sell it, it would earn millions of dollars. Who gets the money for that? Is it Marilyn's estate? Is it the person who made the film? Is it the person who coded the AI? And there is no commercial governance around that at the moment. There, no precedents have been set, so it's running behind. And so the call out is to catch up.
I mean, I'm going to build on that for a sec. I agree 100%. I think that like timing wise and pace wise at a global scale, we're in it is a bit of a wild west, and there's a lot of learning, and we're all kind of working through that. For United, we obviously run a logistically complex operation. Safety is of paramount importance in everything that we do. It's our number one value. And then we're dealing with customers. Every single traveler has a story. There's a reason someone's flying there. All of us flew in here, for example, to come to this event. And so customers place great trust in us to ensure that every interaction, every experience they have with us is in line with what they expect of United as the biggest carrier out of the US, the world's biggest airline. And so, it's why we have this very robust framework that we've built around responsible AI, which again, like to the point of testing, puts people into the process at every step. We're not just unleashing the models and sort of setting them free in the world. I mean, I'll come back to that example of hemispheres. So if you've flown United over time, you'd be familiar with a seatback magazine called Hemispheres. It used to have 3 perfect days. 3 perfect days was the 3 perfect ways to.
I have used that
to enjoy Cannes as an example. And each edition had a couple of destinations. So we had 24 destinations a year. 12 editions of the magazine a year, 2 per magazine. Today we're on track to get to 330 plus destinations because we're using Gen AI for copy. We're not using it for video or for imagery at this stage. That will come, I'm sure. But we're not using it for that because we've seen when we tested that we were getting some wacky output on it. And it was like, okay, if we go out with this and it's wrong, we'll lose all trust that our travelers have in us. Whereas by taking a stepped approach and just going copy first and using that, we have editors that will review and ensure that the content is verifiable and valid. We created efficiency gains. We could roll out content for all of these destinations that can stay up to the minute with great feeds in from other syndicated sources. But we're stepping our way towards kind of exposing something bigger with other sources of content. And that's where like the agentic side comes in, because we're using agentic again, I think, as I'm going to build on the definition from before to bring memory into play, and this idea of sort of memory-based GPT that understands every interaction we've ever had with me. Because when I travel here, I'm a business traveler, a leader for a business, I'm representative for a brand, I'm traveling with colleagues, I'm interacting with customers, and that's one context. 2 weeks ago, I flew with my wife and 4 kids from Chicago to London. That's a very different context. I'm flying with my wife on an upcoming trip, just the 2 of us. Different again. I'm flying, with a couple of mates on a trip. Different context again. And every one of those trips, I'm providing signals about who I am. We're capturing those. We have thousands of attributes on every customer, to the point about indexing data in a way that identity becomes a driver for personalization. And that's where I think our challenge is to make sure that we're using these agentic tools to deliver this hyper personalization, super contextually relevant, but to do it in a way that we're not ever breaking customer trust. And so again, it literally is just, we're slowly stepping into it. And with use case after use case, we start small, we build it out, we make sure there's, it's not tripping any hallucination, throwing up anything that's inappropriate or incorrect. And then when we feel confident, that's when we sort of unleash it to scale.
And building on both of your perspectives on that, I think that there's another component as well. You keep coming around trust. There's also trust in the brand that you've now built.
Yes.
So that trust or that brand equity now transcends that singular transaction and the memories that go into the contextualization. And it starts with, is the model learning from, pulling from, indexing from, or being informed by good data in the first place?
Yeah.
Good pricing information that wasn't actually scraped from somewhere else, redirection of links that don't take you to a false site, information that may be consistent with the way you want your brand presented. All of those elements start with the data that goes into the model, and it's predicated on that initial level of trust in the data supply chain that feeds it in the first place.
You take that to the next nth degree. The more crap that AI turns out, the more it will train itself on its own crap.
Absolutely.
And, like
the appropriately
the echo chamber of crap.
Well, exactly. It's like it will binge on its own junk food.
That's right. And so when you think about the question of how do you start to build in mechanisms to prevent the fraud, it's not a binary scenario as we're all trained to do in the fraud and security space. You don't wait for the outcome to find the badness. You have to understand all of the steps along the journey that all influence the ultimate transactional behavior that you want to create, whether it's go shopping, whether it's set up a trip, whether it's use this with some level of confidence and make a decision. All of it's predicated on multiple steps, all that have trust layers associated with it. So it's not just testing the activity in small doses, it's understanding levels of trust throughout the entire process and trying to decide how much or how little you believe in the automation that led you to that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting aspect on those layers of trust that happens at each step of the process. Each of these steps of the process used to be done by human beings, and now they are being done by autonomous agents that are acting on behalf of those human beings, which is completely changing and shifting the dynamics between brands and consumers and what that means, which begs a question of, like, who is now the real end audience? Who is that target audience? Is it the human being, or is it the agent that has full autonomy to act on that human's behavior? And with that in mind, is that, and should it change how you think about measurement or attribution when it's the agent completing the clicks and the conversions, not the human?
So I have a very controversial thought on that, and I'd love
controversy on a panel.
There we go.
Here comes the drama, guys. Get ready.
So it's none of this. It's the end result of an agentic behavior should be a successful transaction. So it's conversion of the lead.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out from there.
And actually, early research that we've done around how have these experiences, especially around like conversational search, changed consumer behavior. And one of the biggest things we've seen is a contraction of the decision journey. It's about 4 times more likely to get to a conversion. And when you think about all the marketers here, what does that mean? Well, when you think about something like search that had traditionally been a performance channel, now you can drive awareness, you can do comparison shopping, you can do absolutely everything within the conversational AI experience, from branding all the way through to conversion. So it really sort of upends what we had thought of as a very sophisticated marketing channel, and has just tremendous possibilities.
No, I think with that, like using search as an example, and me being the creative lens on top of that, I would say it helped us to bring search or that moment of the journey to something that it was just a path and now could be the end to creatively, because like the more we have information and the more we use like that first page, that first result to bring like, oh, you can travel to Cannes. You get a plane from United. You go to Nice, and then you do this, and then you stay there. That could be in the search, like the first paragraph, and like, okay, your trip is done. I solve here. All right, let's go. Boom.
Yeah.
Right. Versus, oh, now I have to go to the United website. Now I have to go to this website. Now I have to go this. Like it makes it smaller, but like, and from the creative perspective, it doesn't affect the branding and doesn't affect like the relationship with the brand, because like why we're saying like, oh, it's how we make it shorter, but not just shorter, but good to the consumer in a way that you're not losing the value of your brand by doing that too.
So it's so spot on. I was just saying, when you start with a consumer problem, that helps.
Yes.
So like we see something like 86% of consumers abandon their journey if they get disappointing search results, right? So we're piloting right now something called showroom ads, where you can search for something and then it launches a really like tactile, like immersive brand showroom experience, with the highest quality creatives, right? Visuals, imagery, soon to be video, and it will have that memory of everything you've asked it before, and the creative will change based on what's going on with the AI agent. So just like another interesting example of that had been a friction point for consumers, and how can AI try to solve that in an interesting way?
Well, I mean, I was just going to add, I can definitely see a future where your media report says we had X amount of AI considerations and then X amount of human conversions. So it will probably be referenced in that reporting, but I think you have to optimize for both. But to the point about transactions, I mean, at PayPal, we know a human has to make that final transaction, and I think in terms of governance, giving complete autonomy to an AI agent to make those transactions on your behalf, you could, but I personally think when it comes to shopping, we're some way off that. Maybe buying, meme coins on a daily basis with an AI agent, maybe, but buying a pair of trousers, I think that's still a human.
So shameless plug, Henry. If you want that report, we can actually build it for you now.
Right.
It is interesting though, because we are seeing actually like autonomous checkout or like smart shopping experiences start to come fruition. I wonder if it questions like, where is the right element where you do give up that control, or what is the type of profile who tends to give up that control? Like there could be a very specific audience. It could be like the new, I don't know what the buzzword for cord cutters is, and I'm not completing any tasks on my own, but like that could become a future audience that we're talking about.
I just wonder where duty of care comes in, and vulnerable audiences, and giving that autonomy away. And the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK is very, very active in businesses like PayPal. So we need to ensure that we have a lot of governance around enabling that autonomy.
Let's actually get into the governance conversation, because I think it's been coming up quite a bit. What sort of governance or regulations should be in place to make sure that agentic AI doesn't spiral out of control? I could see like fraud, I could see misinformation, manipulation. Like these are all things that could and potentially will happen as a result.
I think already are.
Already are, yes, for sure. But like, how do we prevent that from happening? What sort of models or regulations should be in place? And also, who is responsible for creating that?
I think it's challenging, no question, because if you're a brand like United, you're a brand like PayPal, Microsoft, we're dealing with billions of transactions and interactions with customers every year, and being able to thread through those and understand what's human initiated, and a human conversion through to what's sort of driven by an agent in that process, I think it's going to get harder and harder. I think in the world of media, it's certainly, it's a new frontier in terms of fraud risk for some of the traditional models and the traditional payment models. And so, ultimately, like the value that we're generating with connected media is our ability to serve, the appropriate ad to the right customer, optimize for value for that individual, optimize for lifetime value impact for United, and Mileage Plus, and optimize for value to the brand. And so back to Henry's point, I think, to the extent that, we have these underlying, or even Stu, your point, these underlying drivers around sort of commerce conversion being at the core of what we're trying to achieve, and that being done by humans, I think we build a responsible AI framework for everything we do that considers, how do we plan for fraud? How do we plan for bad actors? How do we plan for AI not going rogue? How do we keep it human and real? And how do we make it brand building and sort of, empathetic? And all of those elements, they're just coming from within our own organization. And so we're out there doing this. Other airlines are doing the same thing. I'm sure, every brand on this panel is doing the same thing. And I think it's one of the challenges we all face is the speed, to Henry's point, the speed at which AI and its use cases is evolving as we all move towards the singularity, if we're all in a simulation perhaps, then I think we're all behind. Yeah. And we're all racing to try to keep up, but none of us can do it fast enough. So to the extent that there needs to be a role for larger scale regulation that, arguably needs to operate on a global scale because of sort of the risk of, different nation states achieving different levels of power in this space, I think is something that we as corporations who wield a lot of power and influence, I think there's a role for us to come together around some of the standardization needs here, because otherwise I think we're all going to be chasing it. And it's a real challenge, or it's got to be open sourced, and we've got to get after it through an open source model.
That's where I'm kind of leaning as well. Look, I would never ever say we should get rid of regulation. In fact, we absolutely need it in this case. And by the way, we need governments who understand how to ask the right questions, and that's a whole separate topic. But exactly to the point you're making, at the end of the day, you have to build customer experience and brand affinity. And the only way to do that is to be seen as a responsible steward. And there's going to be a very natural response where people are going to choose to use your concierge agent or not, where they're going to use your agentic transactional payment processing function, or they won't, because it's going to build a brand and a reputation associated with either good or bad behaviors.
Stu, you had mentioned that regulators should be looking at this, but they don't really understand it. And, Nellie and Luke, we heard from you that this technology is just moving so fast. Is there a concern that if regulators were to step in before they, or even we, fully understand what this technology is capable, that we could stifle creativity, that we could stifle innovation?
Yeah, I call that Tuesday. That unfortunately happens all the time, yeah. Right? The reality is, just like the adversary outpaces the defender, regulation is always lagging behind innovation, and regulation will stifle innovation if it's not built with a framework to actually create sustainability around it. Yeah. Look, I think that's a common reality. But again, I don't want to, I would love your perspective, Henry, in particular, because I think that notion of brand affinity, yeah, or brand association with quality is a huge driver here that the regulators will actually latch upon. So for instance, I would never go and transact with PayPal unless I knew that PayPal had a secure transactional behavior. But that's core to their business model. That's not core to their AI strategy. That's core to existing as a company. So they're going to solve for that. And now I have to figure out how they solve for it effectively and build frameworks from a regulatory and legal perspective that allows that to continue. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I think we are absolutely, trust is so central to the PayPal brand. It's untrue. And we very cautiously protect that. So anything that we do needs to be founded with, as I say, a duty of care to our consumers. 400 million PayPal customers globally, 35 million merchants who take PayPal at checkout. So big numbers, a big part of GDP essentially. So yeah, we really have to ensure that we are operating very responsibly and in line with those regulations that exist. As I say, the FCA in the UK is something that we work very, very closely with.
Yeah, I think brand trust and certainly authenticity is a really important conversation here, and really important also too in the creative side. And this wouldn't be Cannes Lions if we didn't talk about the creative just a little bit. So Oct, I'd love to hear from you, like your perspective. You know, how are you protecting like brand authenticity when AI agents are being used more and more on the creative side, some of which were acting in real time without human approval?
I think it's a good moment for the brands to do a stop and see who are their brands and how they are communicating about themselves first, to make sure that all the same principles are being trained to this AI to have the same, right? Because like if you think the whole timeline, we suffer through the chatbots, right? Remember those chatbots that were like, oh, I can do this, I need to do this, and probably everyone was like agent, 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 agent,
Zero or
agent,
zero. That works
right?
too.
Like zero, 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 zero.
Representative.
Yeah, exactly. So and now we are in the moment that institution can actually work really well and bring your brand in the easiest way and communicate that. But that needs to have the context. That needs to understand who are the brand, how is our brand voice, how the brand voice is going to exist, how the historic between the brand and the consumer, like you were saying, I can be way more relevant and I can be way more closer to my client if I'm telling inside that context, not just from that communication, but like from the broad story over there. But the brands need to understand the importance of how your brand voice are being carried over that, and we just not just using just like a regular script, right? Because like if you call American Express on a platinum line, the way the communication, the way they treat you as a member of that service, and the way they treat you on that communication, that's key to their core of business, the care communication. So the moment that you lose that on your agent, you're losing everything that you work so hard to build for your brand. And I think this is really important at that stage right now.
One more quick round the horn before we run out of time. What's one piece of advice that you would give to thought leaders and businesses today of how they should be thinking about agentic AI for the future?
It's not the future, it's right now.
I mean, you know, this idea of AI transforming the office, and you know, we all use it to some degree, but we are, I would remind us all, at the bleeding edge. For the rest of the population who are working in different industries, I think this idea that suddenly we're going to get mass efficiency overnight is a little bit ambitious, and I would just come back to it takes time to train people and embed this new behavior of AI utilization in everyday behavior. So just dedicate time to it, but please give your teams a chance to build new behaviors and to get trained on it properly.
Well, Stu took mine, so I'm going to come up with another one, which is, I've heard some of our senior leaders talk about how transformative AI is and often liken it to electricity, right? So before we realized how to harness electricity, it did have the potential for harm, right? And then things like circuit breakers were invented and surge protectors. And so we're at a moment now where we think about what is the responsible way to do this to make sure that it is rolled out in a way that becomes like electricity. You almost don't even notice it. It becomes embedded in your day-to-day life. And I do think that's a future we're all going to if we continue to, challenge each other to have these types of discussions.
Yeah, and my challenge is more how we make sure that we use with the right intent, but in a good way, like what problem we are trying to solve and how we are solving that, like with the set guardrails, with the set brand standards overall, and not just to be a gimmick, right? There was an app for that. How many, the market is very cyclical on those things. At one point, everyone wants to have an app, and everyone wants to have an app, or then a website in the past, and then like we can keep going back. Now everyone wants an AI. Let's just do one step back and like how we are putting AI to solve our problems and enable us to go further, not just have AI for the sake of having AI, because then you can actually be more relevant to your customers and to your brand and be more efficient in the end.
Bring us home, Luke.
I'm going to say, and maybe this is a good one given where we're sitting today, I'm going to say keep it human. And by that, I mean two things. One, make sure that as you think about different use cases, don't get too enamored with pure optimization and efficiency goals. It's super easy to do that. Think very much about the impact on the customer experience and how the customer is going to take that away. Super brief example. We launched something like 6-7 years ago now called Every Flight Has a Story, where we wanted to communicate to customers what was happening to their flight, the reason for a delay. We wanted to fill that sort of vacuum of knowledge with information in the moment that told customers what was going on. It was very machine driven. You know, it was like mechanical X with flight 1, 2, 3, 4. And now and there were like 50 variants of messaging that went out. Now there's thousands of variants. We use Gen AI for the driver. We're increasingly turning to agentic to then adapt that for each individual user based on what we know about them and how they interact with these messages to essentially make them super personal. So mine tends to talk with like an Aussie surfer voice, and it's like, you know, hey, don't worry about it. Like the weather's not playing nice, but everything's gonna be cool. Like we'll get to your destination on time, and you know you can expect about a 20-minute delay for takeoff, but we're gonna land on time. And so like ways that we're using these tools that are like, ultimately connecting with people in a human way, I think is really important. And then back to the responsible AI framework. You know, if you don't have one, you should have one, even if it's pretty nascent and sort of rudimentary. And at the heart of that is people and process, and not just handing everything over to these tools and these machines and these capabilities that are available to ensure that, you know, at every step we are in fact responsible in our use and our deployment. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Human, for bringing us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as I think about being a customer, long time for the airline.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A Chicago guy, so yep, have to. You have.
There's other choices there, but we are the obvious one.
Yeah, you
So,
are.
yeah,
You are.
go
That's
ahead.
true. That's true. So as I sit down and I have this wonderful seat back in front of me, and I see this viewer in front of me, I know that in the past, because I have purchased some of them, you can put ads up there that will play, and everyone gets to see that. Are we suggesting that we're going to get to a point in time where you know who Chris Scanlon is, that I've booked passage, and I'm sitting in seat 4A, and that seat back then is going to show me things that I care about, as opposed to it just going out through the entire plane. It'll be personalized for me. So if I'm flying to London and I've got 10 hours of watching really cool stuff that hopefully I buy a bunch of things on.
So the future is here. It's already happening. For anyone that flew over on any of our flights, you would have seen, like, it's welcome Lucian, my full name, and actually an age verification to make sure, you know, I am who I am, and then my date of birth matches the manifest, so we know it's me in the seat. That can then match to the consent I've given, the history that we have on me, and everything we know about me. We recently launched a partnership with Starlink, which puts 5G connectivity to all of our aircraft, so it'll be like your living room in the sky, a 5G experience as you fly around. And we've essentially rebuilt what that seat back looks like, coupled with the handset, coupled with any other like digital devices that you have on board, free Wi-Fi for Mileage Plus membership, and then the ability to essentially deliver real-time programmatic bidding, ads, content, clickable commerce into the seat back experience. I mean, Henry and I were talking before this panel, shopping is entertainment today. And so, you know, the ability to, through 3 perfect days, say I'm going to Cannes, you know, like I'm light on linen and I need some new outfits. Like, where am I going in Cannes, and what's the latest lookbooks for men of a certain age? And, you know, there's my examples. There's my examples. You know, there's some ads served from local retailers. There's the opportunity to buy in advance, you know, embedded inside the ad. Like, That's happening now, and it's scaling across our fleet. And I think we think it's a really unique experience for travel. Again, built around travelers rather than the act of traveling, built around the individual. But I think that's where it's at. So, and what that enables for brands to sort of engage with customers as they're essentially strapped in. We have 3.5 hours of average screen time engagement per flight per traveler. We have an amazing opportunity, brands have an amazing opportunity to engage and interact with travelers in that moment, as well as do things like connect their favorite streaming service and others. We have a partnership we just launched with Spotify, which is really unique. We took that partnership away from one of our competitors, and we've done amazing things with it in terms of delivering a rich, personalized experience curated to the traveler, relevant to the destination they're heading to, podcast, music, etc. So there's so many cool opportunities that are coming in this space, all enabled by connectivity, by amazing, what ad tech essentially allows us to do, but increasingly powered by Gen AI for content and agentic for hyper personalization at scale across our ecosystem. So great question. Thanks. It felt like a layup. So
thank you guys. Oh. Someone has
I'll take yours. Sorry, I have so many questions on this. Henry, we were discussing, you had suggested maybe with governance, it's not there yet for the full transactional thing. And so maybe I'm just the perfect persona to market to, because I travel so much and go a lot of places. So I do shop a lot because I hate going to stores. And so you have my captive attention, or I'll shop in various airports, either way. But when I think about making purchases, so I've been wanting to get some new Maui Jim sunglasses. And so there's this thing on Google, and it sends me stuff saying, hey, those sunglasses are now at this price. I've seen them pop up. The next step that I personally would logically want to go to is, well, just buy them for me. Yeah. And I know that's a scary proposition and there's all sorts of governance, but I personally wouldn't mind kind of setting thresholds. I think of it almost like when you're buying stocks, right? You have a stop loss and you tell your broker, hey, don't buy it below this or buy below that. So could I put parameters in that say, hey, if those sunglasses come in between here and here, don't just alert me now that it's time, because I might be 30,000 feet up in the air somewhere. Just go do it for me. And so
I told you there was an audience for it.
But I don't necessarily want them to go buy me a house either. So, small little consumables like that we've already indicated there's an interest. Why not just go do it?
Yeah. And I think, as long as you say, you've indicated there's an interest, it has come, the buy instruction has come from a human. There is a certain amount of governance there. PayPal actually own an interesting business, or has done for a while, called Honey. And Honey is a great sort of shopping browser extension that monitors price for a lot of products. So we've got that capability to identify those price drops. And if the buy instruction is given, I would say it's possible. I would say that we're not doing it yet. But what we are doing is trying to make that buy opportunity for you as easy and as frictionless as possible and available everywhere. So we're taking the PayPal button out of retailer websites and putting it into the ads that PayPal are delivering around the web. So you can see a pair of Nike sneakers, you can identify that it's the right price based on the historical pricing data that we can put into the ad. You can hit buy, and you can buy that within one click from the ad. So it's sort of reducing the steps, it's making it frictionless, it's making it everywhere, and it's absolutely a nod to agentic commerce. And PayPal's already struck a deal with Perplexity to power the buying opportunity within the Perplexity app. So you search outfits for Cannes, it will come up with 4 pairs of sneakers. You hit buy, you'll be able to do that all within in Perplexity and without having to visit the retailer website. So, yeah.
Which is tough for the retailers.
Which is tough for the retailers. I mean, they still get that sale, but they just maybe get less browsing opportunities on their website. So, I mean, it's a great point. How do we still facilitate serendipity and exploration? And obviously the answer is we ask the AI to do it. But So that's again another balance: exploration versus exploitation, as they say.
Thank you so much for those additions. Some of the panelists will be able to stick around a little bit after, so if there's anything lingering, please feel free to come up. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.